Hey, you're about to listen to an older episode of the Volunteer Youth Worker podcast. This is a podcast that Sid Coop, Jason Ballard, and myself, Jeremy McDonald, started back in 2018 to answer the practical questions that you're asking in your youth ministry. But lots has changed since we started it in 2018. We've changed the name. We're doing new and different events and lots of other things. The thing that hasn't changed, though, is the content you're about to listen to, we think is still really valuable. But if you notice that some of the things we're talking about are obviously a little bit older, that is okay. You can always head to youthworker.community to stay up to date with what's happening currently right now here in 2024, and you can track along with us there. We'd love to see you. But enjoy this episode. Episode 116 of the Youth Ministry Team Podcast. Welcome back. This is Jeremy and Sid teeing up today's conversation. And this was a really fun one. This is where I got a chance to hear from James and Pugeni, two folks from the Canadian Foodgrains Bank. And we did a partnership with them recently, Sid?
Yeah, I mean, Jared, the work that these guys are doing globally is unbelievable. And the more that we got to talk with them and hear the stories and find out exactly what they're doing, the more that we were saying, oh, our youth workers in our country need to hear this. It's going to be inspirational, but not just inspirational. They have really thoughtfully put together some great tools that we can use in our ministries to help inspire and equip students to engage issues of hunger, justice, poverty in really practical ways. So, you know, Jared, we did this webinar with the Canadian Foodgrains Bank as well, and it's in the show notes, so you can access it. And there they gave us this great tool around hunger for justice that we think is fantastic. Again, if you're a youth worker, you've got a small group of students, or you've got a team of youth workers working with students, this tool can really help your students think well about biblical justice and helping with issues of poverty and hunger. So we love the Canadian Foodgrains Bank, Jared, and this podcast, I mean, what a cool experience it was for you to be able to interview them for this podcast, eh?
Yeah, Pugeni's got a great story that he'll tee up right at the start about coming to Canada as a first-time ever visitor and getting caught in the midst of a snowstorm and not knowing where to go, and the generosity of a local. Anyways, he'll fill you in, but so it's awesome. Fascinating. So we're really excited for that, the work that they're doing, and honestly, you guys, the point of all of these conversations, this whole podcast, is so that you, as a volunteer youth worker on the front lines, that you can be encouraged, that you can be equipped, so you can better disciple students this week, and getting you access to these kinds of conversations and these kinds of resources will certainly do that. So really looking forward to it. Anything else you want to say, Sid, before we jump into the conversation?
No, let's jump in. This is fantastic.
Welcome to the Youth Ministry Team Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the team of volunteers. So this podcast is for the whole team. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you're asking so you can be encouraged and equipped as you head into your role in your youth ministry this week.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Youth Ministry Team Podcast. This is Jeremy hosting today's conversation between James and Pugeni, and this is perhaps the most broad conversation that we've had from like an where people are coming from conversation. Now, James, you and I are in our country of Canada, and we've done some podcasts that kind of span across the country. But Pugeni, although you've spent a lot of time in Canada, right now, fill people in where are you coming from?
Well, right now I'm in Kigali. That's where I'm actually connecting with you from.
I love it. And Kigali is a part of which country? Because I had to Google it, to be honest and fair, to find out where it was at.
Oh, that's interesting that you... Well, Kigali is part of Rwanda. So the capital city of Rwanda is Kigali, and that is where I am.
I think that's so amazing. And so fill us in a little bit on who you are, Pugeni, a little bit of your journey and what led you to Kigali specifically, just so that our audience can understand a bit of your journey.
Well, I am from Zimbabwe. That is where I grew up. I'm born in Zimbabwe and I grew up in Zimbabwe. While in Zimbabwe, I worked with a lot of church-based organizations. And it's just something that happened that after university, all the work I did was largely with church-based organizations. So I'm really excited about talking about ending hunger and talking about how the church and how Christians can make a contribution. While in Zimbabwe, I had an opportunity to work with a project that was funded by the United Church of Canada and the Canadian Foodgrains Bank through a local partner, Christian Care Zimbabwe. So during that time, that is when I got to meet James, who by then was a public engagement coordinator. And they wanted somebody to come to Canada to do some speaking tours. And they nominated that I come to Canada to do that. So that was my first connection with Canada. And that was actually the first time that I was in the plane flying all the way across the oceans to Canada. You can imagine the fear and the uncertainty and also the hope and the trust in God as I flew across oceans, going to a place where there were people I don't know, other than knowing the names on emails. So when I got to Canada, to be honest with you, Jeremy, it was really, really exciting. It was an exciting moment of my life, yet also the most depressing moment of my life. Exciting in that I could see how advanced Canada was. I could see how everything works well in Canada. Your money buys well. At that time, inflation in Zimbabwe was over 3 million or maybe 4 million%. And our national budget was actually being pronounced in quadrillions. So the Minister of Finance would say our budget this year is $10 quadrillion. It was crazy in Zimbabwe. It was a time when just buying milk in a supermarket would cost you a lot of money. I remember buying an egg for $2 billion in Zimbabwe. So this is the context that I'm living. I'm living in Zimbabwe, where I am literally a billionaire in the sense that I could buy eggs for $2 billion, like 2 eggs for $2 billion. And I landed in Canada only to find that the $20 note that I had, which to me was a lot of money, was not even sufficient. And people would not look at me as somebody who had money. I took for granted that it's cold in Canada. So there I was at the airport in Toronto without a jacket in winter. And all I had was an address of, I think it was the then communications director of the Canadian Foodgrains Bank. It was Heather Platt, I think. I had her address, and I knew that when I get to Canada, I called this lady and she will pick me up at the airport. So flights were cancelled in Toronto because of the snowstorm that was the snowstorm that was there. And I went to the desk for Air Canada and said, "Hey, I need to go to Winnipeg." And they said, "Well, the flight is cancelled." And I said, "But I know no one here." And they said, "Well, we don't provide accommodation for people when a flight has been cancelled because of natural causes like a snowstorm." So then I said, "Can you please call this lady? She can come and pick me up." So they looked at my number and the address and they all started laughing. They said, "Oh, why are you laughing?" Like, because Zimbabwe is such a small country, I could not imagine how big Canada is. I couldn't even imagine that somebody cannot travel from Winnipeg by road to come and pick me up in Toronto. Maybe it's possible it will take a lot of days. In addition, think of it this way. There was a snowstorm, which is the reason why planes were not flying. I couldn't even connect that because there is a snowstorm, then someone will not be able to drive. Now, turning it around to what we are discussing today, I want you to see that the worldview that you live in is completely different from the worldview that other people live in. And it is very easy for you to take it for granted, to take your privileges and some of the opportunities that you have and the resources that you have. It's easy to take that for granted. For me, all I have known is drought after drought. I could not even imagine seeing snow. I could not even imagine seeing a country so rich. I couldn't even imagine a country that big with all those natural resources. So this was the issue. And anyway, to just show you the beauty of God's work in his people, there I was panicking, not having accommodation, not knowing how to proceed next. And I had told myself I would just sleep in the airport. And a certain lady who decided to be anonymous saw me and felt sorry for me. She could just see this guy is very cold and he is shivering. He needs something warm. So she came to me and said, "Hey, sir, I think you need help. Can I give you a jacket?" And I said, "No." because at this point, my cultural background and the Canadian cultural backgrounds are now at a clash. There is now culture clash. In my culture, a man is the one who extends a hand of help to a woman. A woman cannot come to a man who is a stranger and just offer help. So for me, that was just a very interesting dynamic. She looked at me and smiled and said, "Welcome to Canada. It's cold here. You need help. We are getting you a jacket." So she went straight with me into the closest gift shop, bought a jacket for me, gave it to me, and then she organized for my accommodation and she paid the bill for my accommodation. So I had a place to sleep, I had food to eat, and the next morning I was able to come back to the airport and flew back to Winnipeg. I'll end there for now, but I just wanted you to see what Christians can actually do and how God can work through other people to bring assistance, especially when people are difficult. I also felt that this part of my history coming to Canada can also help people realize that the context that we live is very different. And it is very easy for us to take things for granted. For me, it was not fun to just see snow. You can imagine the prayers that I made in the evening when I was at the hotel. One of the prayers was, "God, why don't you give Africa snow? Because Africa will have a lot of rain and they will have a lot of water for plants." And in the process of doing that prayer, a revelation came to me again and said, "God, if snow comes to Africa, people will not have warmth. They will not have enough heat to heat their homes. How will they even survive?" There I was conflicted, thinking about the terrible dry conditions in Southern Africa and the beautiful wet conditions in Canada where water is actually being preserved as snow. So that was just a bit that I can share for now.
Man, there's so many, fascinating things about that story. Just as a story, it's so interesting to listen to. But I love how you drew back to the context, the worldview that we live in, because I think for so many of us, especially if we haven't been able to travel internationally or travel to other places, we just only know our own personal worldview, and the fact that, as you indicated, the worldview you have is perfectly suited for your own context. But gosh, if you go to somewhere else, it will be, perhaps you'll miss so many of the nuances of culture, about being able to even just to make the right decisions about what to wear, and our own ignorance as wherever we're listening from. We carry a level of ignorance about other parts of the world, and so acknowledging that, I think is man, that's so fascinating. Thanks so much for sharing that.
I think, Jeremy, you are very right. I will just add a little bit and say you really summed it up well. So I will show you where the context can also be interesting. There can be a punch, there can be a pinch, and sometimes there can be a joy. So now from the airport, I go out and now I'm with the Canadian Foodgrains Bank. They take me out to the Pereiras to talk to farmers and all the supporters of the Grains Bank. They have amazing supporters. People were coming in large numbers to listen to me. But there was something bothering me all the time throughout this trip. Number one, the amount of food wastage. Like, I was in the farms and I saw heaps and heaps of corn that was just piled outside. And when I asked them, like, "Why are you piling this corn outside?" Like, they said, "Well, it's for cattle." I'm like, "This is for food. This is what my people need." There I was trying hard to convince the farmers to ship all the corn to Africa, to my village. I'm like, "Guys, if you ship this corn to my village, you make such a big difference." And they spoke from their worldview. They started laughing. They said, "No, no, no, Pugeni, this is for our cows. This is not for people." And the other part, which you might find very insignificant, but it meant a lot to me. I remember, I think it was Jan Bennen, the farmer that I asked. I still remember the names of some of the people. I said, "How come the birds in Canada are not even eating the corn?" Because in Africa, you can't leave your corn outside and the birds will just come and eat everything. It seems like everything is hungry in Africa. And in this context, people are just leaving it outside. I'm like, and Jan looked at me. "Yeah, Pugeni, don't worry. You'll see a lot more. This is just the beginning." So for me to just see how my context could not connect with the Canadian context in terms of, now I understand And I don't want people to feel bad about it. I think it's a good thing that people are blessed. They do have resources. But I think that the most important thing to note there is that we are in our own context. It's easy for us to not see the privilege and the gifts and the talents and the opportunities that we have. And sometimes we feel overwhelmed on how we can make a difference, when in actual fact, we are the best people placed to do that.
Man, that's so great. James, I would love for you to give people a little bit of context even about this organization, Foodgrains Bank. So I know we've had your friend and your coworker, Roberta, on a previous podcast, but in case somebody hasn't listened to that episode, what is it like? Here you've brought a gentleman all the way from Africa. He's never been to Canada before. You're bringing him to talk to farmers. Like, what is this organization? Lots of us don't even understand or know the context of how Foodgrains Bank is making such a difference dramatically beyond our borders.
Well, the Foodgrains Bank is an organization committed to ending world hunger. And so as Pugeni related the story about his passion for ending global hunger, that's what brings people together at the Foodgrains Bank. It's a large network, so a fairly large organization. We are a Christian response to hunger, and what that means for us is Christians have gathered together to answer the call to end hunger, to feed the world, to feed hungry people, as they say. So it also means that Christians have to set aside whatever differences that they have, and in order to work together productively, they come together with a unified purpose. So for the Foodgrains Bank, that means bringing together 15 different church agencies that are committed to doing relief and development around the world. So Pugeni talked about MCC. MCC, Mennonite Central Committee, is an organization that's devoted to relief and development. Well, they come to the Foodgrains Bank as one of those Christian churches or members and said, at the Foodgrains Bank, this is how we deal with food security, hunger, about access to food. As does, and Pugeni also mentioned, the United Church of Canada and the Catholic Organization Development of Peace and the Nazarenes and the Pentecostals, and I'm gonna make the list too long, so I won't go on. You can check that out. But pretty well, most of the main church denominations have gotten together. And you can imagine if they all get together, they'll find lots of things to disagree about. But one thing they agree about is let's work together to end hunger. So it's a very large network, and it brings together hundreds of partners around the world. And we like to amplify those partner voices, which is why we have Pugeni on the line from speaking. Well, he's working with MCC now, and that's a whole story in and of itself. But it's a global network working together. And I think there's some real value in bringing together a lot of people to work together. There's a huge learning that takes place when you are put in the same room with other people and you say, let's work together. How are we going to do it? So that's the Foodgrains Bank in a nutshell. And Pugeni mentioned farmers because originally the vision of the Foodgrains Bank was, let's ship that food that Pugeni's talking about. We have excess food coming off the fields. And so the brainchild was, let's find a way to get that food to hungry people. Of course, that's a long story. And to make it short, we don't ship food anymore, because we ourselves were advocating for better systems, global systems, to make sure that people don't go hungry, to make sure people have and enjoy food security.
Yeah, well, maybe you can speak to the complexity of this, because I think, again, for lots of us listening, like perhaps we've heard, when we read scripture, we understand Jesus says, I was hungry and then you fed me, or I was hungry and you didn't feed me. This invitation to meet such a practical need. And yet in our global setting today, feeding somebody that's hungry can be complex. In some ways it's simple, like somebody's hungry, they need something to eat. And yet the way that we can actually make a difference in that can be used maybe to be more helpful, like to spread your ability to be helpful, across around the world. It doesn't have to be just a localized thing. But there's a lot of complexities to this big issue of world hunger. So I don't know, maybe if that's a question maybe for you, James, to just fill us in on what you've learned about meeting the invitation of Christ in a global context. What are some of the things that maybe would surprise people about what it means to feed a hungry person?
That is such a great question, Jeremy. And what I really love about that question is that it encourages and invites people to decide on a learning journey. Because and that image that Pugeni said, for such a simple image of seeing excess and hey, we have, so why don't we ship it over there, right? Seems so simple, seems so straightforward, seems so practical. And I would say that right there represents kind of the beginning of the Foodgrains Bank's learning journey, where we say, let's do a practical response. Let's figure out how to do this. And that began, more than 30 years ago, right? So well over 30 years ago, because when the food bank first started, it was like, yeah, let's figure out how to do this. And that was in the 1970s and early 80s when people, we had food crises around the world, food price increases and conflict happening in South Asia and later in Ethiopia related to famine. And, the world is learning about why is there hunger? So for us, the learning journey starts when people ask the question, why is there hunger? People want to help, and that's absolutely the most basic and good response, especially for Christians when we read God's word and it says, this is what you are to do. But as soon as you ask the question, well, why is there hunger? Then you've started your learning journey. Be careful what that brings you, because it will bring you, yes, more complexity. I don't like to overwhelm people with complexities because you got to start somewhere. The good thing about the Foodgrains Bank is we've been on this learning journey, and there's so much that can be learned when you join with a network of people who've been on that learning journey. So we know that it's not just so simple as saying, well, there's excess food here while they're feeding it to cows. Well, let's just divert it and ship it overseas. And I'd like to hear Pugeni talk about what he has learned, having moved to Canada, having learned what he's learned and lived here and working for an agency that's doing this work. And now he's headed back to Africa. There's not enough hours in this podcast probably to answer that question that you asked. Tell us about your learning journey. But when you ask that question, why, it leads you to other areas. And so we've tried to give youth a package to help them begin that learning journey. It's got all our calls to action, which are to pray, give, learn, and advocate. Well, how did we come up with those four? Not that there isn't more, but how did we come up with those four? Well, the learning journey has instructed that. It's led us on that path. So we invite people to enter that learning journey wherever they're at, and to learn more. So that's what I would focus on. But I'm curious about Pugeni's learning journey, because I know that it's more complex than just a pile of corn that he encountered when he first came to Canada. By the way, Pugeni, I don't remember that first story of you coming and being cold and having the snowstorm. My journey at the Foodgrains Bank began with Pugeni. He was my first quote-unquote project. I got there. You're the public engagement coordinator. Your first job is to itinerate this guy named Pugeni. We've already bought him a flight ticket. I'm like, well, who is this guy and what do I do? And and so I've got to itinerate him and get this guy from Zimbabwe is going to go and visit farmers. Okay, well, seems simple enough. Just get him here and see what happens. That's a lot of years ago now, Pugeni, but maybe you can tell us a bit more of that journey, where that's taken you in terms of the question, why are people hungry? I'm curious.
Yes, thank you so much, James. I think that one of the biggest reason why people are hungry, as you rightly pointed out, we do have climate change, we do have conflict, we do have now COVID, which is now affecting food systems and affecting the way people interact with each other in the way they make their own food. I think that the other point that I wanted to point out is that people can also be hungry, not because food is not available, but just because food is not accessible. So, I think it's very important for us to also make that distinction. For example, when you look at my story, when I was very surprised to see a lot of corn everywhere in Canada, the question there is that food accessible to those that need it? So in this case, that food was not accessible. Now, James spoke about how it is not just as easy as taking the food from Canada to to Africa or to the country that is in need of it. That is very true. And in my role, working with MCC as the Planning, Learning and Disaster Response coordinator, where I was just coordinating humanitarian assistance projects for about 8 years, it became very clear to us that sometimes very good intentions can actually lead to harm. So people have very, very good intentions, but it can lead to harm. For example, taking the corn that I saw piling up on the ground in the Pereires. If you decide that I want to ship that corn all the way to Africa, who are some of the actors that are going to suffer because of that action? So the farmers that are in the region of that country are not going to be able to have access to markets because those markets have already been taken over by the corn that you have sent. The quality of the corn and the type of corn, people's cultural eating habits. How are you even helping ensure that people are able to try to aspire to produce because they can also see in a market that is available? So in trying to help people get food, the Mennonite Central Committee as well as the Canadian Foodgrains Bank do agree that it's complex and it has to be navigated carefully. And one way is to encourage procurement of food supplies within the region or closer to the place where it is needed. It does not only cut costs, but it also helps buy food that people are used to, and it also assists in strengthening the markets around that areas. And when markets are strengthened, there is resilience of food systems. And when a shock hits, food systems in that particular area are able to bounce back. So I would say that is one thing. And the second thing, I really liked what James said about prayer, about we have to give, we have to pray, we have to advocate. Prayer is very, very important. As MCC, we are very proud that we are a global non-profit organization that strives to share God's love and compassion for all through relief, development, and peace. So this is something that we are really proud of because we believe that God's compassion can be shared. And we believe that people can actually pray to God to get the guidance in terms of finding ways of how to share that compassion with others through relief, development, and peace. Peace is very important to us because we realize that hunger or food insecurity is a justice issue. In some communities, people are hungry, and in other communities, people live in abundance. So it is very important for us to think about these two scenarios, where on one end we have a country or a place that is very hungry. On the other, we have a place where people are living in abundance. And my challenge to the youth today is to say that when you see that, do you think of it as a justice issue? Do you think that your involvement in trying to help the other side that is suffering is something that we just do out of our act of love? So in other words, all I'm saying is that I want to challenge our spirituality, our love for God, to think deeply about what exactly does God expect of us and how does he expect us to live together on earth as brothers and sisters through love, care, and compassion, just as Jesus taught us.
Okay, so this is so helpful, you guys. I think I'm curious as to know what you would suggest as a stepping stone for teenagers in particular. So we've got youth workers who are listening in; they're learning. So this is exciting. And when you say, there's a complexity to hunger. There's other things that we need to take into account. I think we've got teenagers in our ministries that are absolutely passionate about doing something about this. They honestly, I think, and this is what I love about Next Generations, is that you can basically point them in a direction and they'll start running. And they're excited about it. They're, when you mention things about justice, about having an abundance, and people don't have more, like there's they still remember being taught about sharing. We need to share what we have, and so to think about, okay, what does it mean to pray, to learn a little bit, but now what are the specific things that teenagers can be doing to be giving or to be advocating for so that we can solve this kind of problem where there's hungry people in our world?
Well, I'm curious of what Pugeni will say to that. I think for the Foodgrains Bank, we all want to get people involved. We definitely want people to find ways to give. People get really creative about fundraising events and whatnot. We encourage that. We think that's a really important action to take. We also agree that advocating for greater, and we have resources for this, right? There's not a shortage of resources to advocate out there. I'm going to say that right now. The question is, people, do they trust them or not, right? There's a lot of opportunities to take action, I think, out there. And young people are in their social media feeds, they're inundated with, act to do this or act to do that. But what you really, I think, need is a place where the learning and the action come together. So to build trust. So if you're a Christian young person, you want to find networks where you see Christians working together and research being done, and that you're part of something bigger, basically. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it feels like you're just trying to solve world hunger. You use the word solve. Nobody's going to solve world hunger tomorrow. And so that's why I sort of spoke about that learning journey. So wherever people are at, and in a typical youth group, you have people who are at different places, right? Some people are further along. They want to do this. They want to do that. The other thing. I think for people, it starts with that learning journey. It starts with that desire to understand something more. But I don't think you can go into that journey without being prepared for a transformation of some kind. So when Pugeni says you need to look at that as a justice issue, that might be you turning this around and looking at it from different angles. That might be saying, how are we actually complicit in this problem? Because that's what the Bible does to us. It's a mirror for us. It tells us, hey, you upright person, you think you're so generous and kind, and Jesus had all these parables that were really tough. They're really tough on us. And I think you have to be prepared for that learning journey. But it's a very rewarding journey. And so the actions that people take, first and foremost, needs to be dig deeper. Be a myth buster. Find out what the myths are out there about hunger. Pugeni said, it isn't just about getting food to hungry people. Mm-hmm. That is a part of what we do. But boy, did we ever learn a lot in the last 30 years about how to do that and how not to do that. Mm-hmm. It's about advocating for things at a national level or at a local level. Like, why is there hunger in your own local area? Find out more about why that is, because we have found that people, by and large, who are interested in ending hunger, they're interested in ending hunger locally and globally. There are some similarities. There are some differences. So a youth group, for example, could say, let's learn more about this. Let's dig a little deeper. Let's find out how we can grow in our response. But I would say connecting with an organization like ours, which is we've already gone through a lot of learning. We can contribute, but we're asking people also to contribute their learning and their ideas and their passions. And that's the power of a coalition. That's the power of a network, and a Christian network like ours. So specifically, I would say we have an online letter builder to your member of parliament. Your member of parliament actually needs to know that you care about this. If you believe that Canada can do something because we're a wealthy country, you need to also be a myth buster and say, is Canada really that generous? Are we? Ask the question. Dig a little deeper. You might find stuff that you didn't know was true. And that could be for other issues related to hunger as well. So I would say that journey needs to be focused on learning in many ways. Yeah. And I just want to affirm what Pugeni said about prayer. I think groups who have started prayerfully find a foundation from which to grow.
Yeah, and I think I would just add a little bit on top of that, James. For example, I think that at MCC, we do have young adult programs that youth can also aim for, where you can join MCC as a salter or as a service worker. And basically, you are able to get a chance to come abroad and serve the communities directly, really working with people and seeing how the resources that people who are generously giving are being utilized. And I think in my current role as the area director, That is one of the responsibilities I have, to make sure that I support country directors in making sure that that cross-cultural learning happens well. So that's one thing that people can also do. The other thing, people can also join CFGB or Mennonite Central Committee study tours. These are opportunities that we have for people to come and see. Young adults can come to Africa, they can go to India, they can also see what is going on and have a connection with the people that are being served. And that can actually help them or prompt them into action. You know, sometimes you really need to see that worldview that I was talking about for you to really feel like you can engage with it. So there is also that opportunity. Now, I will also talk of another opportunity which might look very different, but to me, it is very foundational and fundamental. Mennonite Central Committee works through church partners, the same as Canadian Foodgrains Bank. Now, when we say through church partners, we mean we value the indigenous organizations that are formed by local people in all the countries that we serve, because we believe that those indigenous people understand their needs and priorities. And if we work through them and respect them, we are helping their communities to be more resilient, because at the end of our support, we leave organizations that are well trained, that have capacity, that can self organize and solve community problems. So, since we are talking to youths who have a passion for Christ, we want them to know that when they come abroad, they are also meeting youth and churches and church leaders with a passion for Christ. So this is really an exchange of people who have the same value system and beliefs, people who are reading the Bible as Christians, and people who respect each other as neighbors. Now, the reason why I say this may not sound like an action point is that people want to write a letter, which is also very important. But think of it, there is something bigger here that connects us, the love of Christ. And the work that we do connects us through and through, from Canada to the global south. And I just thought I could say, when you say your prayer for the partners in Zimbabwe or the partners in Rwanda or in Malawi, they are also saying a prayer for you. So there is that connection that I also thought I could emphasize. Then we also have our regional offices in Canada, across Canada. MCC has regional offices. People can walk into those offices, go to the office in Ottawa. We have the Peace and Justice office in Ottawa. Go to that office. There are lots of resources. They will also link up with Canadian Foodgrains Bank. We work together very well. In each province that you go to, you likely find an MCC office. It's a good place to start. Go there, learn, and see how you can engage.
So great. We're going to put all of those links in the show notes so that people can access those things and find their ways to those websites. And obviously, we're really excited for Foodgrains Bank putting together this Justice Youth Group Guide, Hunger for Justice Youth Group Guide, that's going to actually walk through a lot of these practical steps, the things that we're talking about, giving the ideas around praying specifically, things to learn about, things to advocate for, and ways to give. And James, I love that you guys are challenging us with advocacy, even thinking about that letter to your MP, because I think I just remember, and I think I mentioned this to Roberta, but I remember as a high school student, as a high school student, middle school student, like, you can raise money for sure, but you also have all this time that you're able to put your name behind something and to challenge people and to ask questions and to advance a cause in that advocacy kind of way. And so I remember doing letter writing campaigns and being excited about being able to take action around those types of things. And so there's something about a movement of young people that is hard to miss or hard to sideline when it comes to even politicians and people in power, because young people have a voice that I don't think they fully understand or realize as young people. And so if we can, as youth workers, encourage them to take those steps, it'd be fascinating to see what could come from all of that. Well, gentlemen, as we're kind of coming to a close here for our youth workers, would love for you to either give just some final words about ways that you can be encouraging them as youth workers, encouraging them as they challenge students. Anything else that you want us to know about before we close our time here today? I'll start with you, James.
Yeah, thanks so much for this opportunity, Jeremy. It's lovely to think about youth workers around the country struggling to find ways to get young people to translate their faith into something that's all about following Jesus and all about being a disciple and all about living out that faith in a concrete way. So as you said, we've tried to do that in the youth group guide to try and provide opportunities to do all of those things, and also within a network. And that's my key message, I think, that I would just repeat, is that if you try to approach this on your own, or even like a youth group on your own, it can feel lonely, and it can feel like you wonder, like, am I really making a difference? But if you become part of a network that is viewed as integral, and that's how we view people who join into the efforts of the Foodgrains Bank, once you realize you're a part of a diverse network of Christians who are working together, it can be a very empowering experience. So I just leave with a message to say, don't go it alone. Work with other people. That's why we have the phrase "working together to end global hunger."
I love that. Pugeni, any last words for our listeners who are Canadian primarily, but certainly we've got listeners coming in from the US, from Australia, from the UK, from other parts of the world?
Yes, my last words are to say that the issue, talking about global hunger, for people who have not had a first experience with hunger itself, can actually feel like a very far-fetched issue. But I am here in Africa, serving with the Mennonite Central Committee as the area director for Southern Africa, Central Africa, and Nigeria. We see these cases every day. People running away from conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo with nothing in their hands. Imagine trying to run away from a conflict and trying to pick up a bag of corn. That would be more impossible. That would be very impossible. So people really decide to protect their children and run away with their children. And when they get to the destinations, they have nothing to feed their family. It is at that point of need that Canadian Foodgrains Bank, the Mennonite Central Committee, and our partners meet these people to give them relief. So I just want to challenge you to say, think of it as a very important issue that can mean life and death for some people. The second thing that I want to just point out is that let's also think of how hunger affects women and girls differently compared to men and women and boys. Let's think of those girls, those young girls that could have a promising future, but cannot have it just because they don't have a meal to eat. Let's think of the desperation that comes as a result of people not having food to eat, and some of the negative and very harmful coping mechanisms that they end up resorting to. So my encouragement is, let's pray, let's advocate, let's give, and as I said earlier on, let's even share our talents by joining the young adult programs that MCC have. Let's join all the growing projects that are scattered all over the provinces in Canada. And as my friend and colleague James said, don't be alone. Don't feel alone. Invite the Canadian Foodgrains Bank to come to your meetings, to provide resources, invite the Mennonite Central Committee to come to your meetings, or to provide the resources for you to do this well. On a personal note, I want to say it is the concern and care that we have for hunger issues that keep some of us going here in Africa. The love of Christ and your willingness to really live your faith in more practical ways give us energy as humanitarian workers. So I also want to say thank you for giving us this opportunity to share our experiences. That on its own is helpful, and it helps us see the bigger picture, believe that God is at work, and believe that we are all together in this.
It's amazing. Thank you guys so much for your time today, and really appreciate it. We'll, as we said, link all this stuff in the show notes, and looking forward to the difference that it's going to make in youth workers and youth ministries all around the world. Thanks so much. Well, there you have it, Sid. Of course, all the links in the show notes. And before we let people go today, we want to let them know of a couple of our other things that we've got going on. First up, our partnership with Trinity Western.
Yeah, we love Trinity Western University. We love the work that they do in equipping students to live out their faith in all sorts of different vocational environments. By the way, they're serious about this stuff too. Like the things that we're talking about resonate with them and the work that they do at Trinity globally as well. So love their work. Also, just want to say this again. If you have a student in your youth ministry that's looking at post-secondary education, we think Trinity is great, not just because of their academics, and their academics are fantastic, but also about the intentional spiritual and leadership formation that happens in the dorms. I love the work that they do, and it's a fantastic place for our students in this next phase of their life. So make sure you check out Trinity Western University, please. We love what they do.
100%. And then, especially if people are listening to this kind of in the live time season of May, June, July, summertime, tell people a little bit about this on the road tour, Sid, that we've got coming up.
Yeah, come on. As if we're not dying to get this thing going. So we now plan and pivot. The two go hand in hand. We plan to pivot. That's how we roll this thing out. So the Youth Worker Road Tour was supposed to happen in April, supposed to happen in June. It is happening in October. Jer, I'm so sure of it. Again, we're doing 21 or 22. We're not sure. Got a couple up in the air. 21, 22 locations over about 16 days, going right across the country. We can't wait to get face-to-face with youth workers again to encourage, equip you to better disciple kids that are in your care. And so go to our website, youthworker.community. You're going to find the information that you need as we update it, and we want to be in space with you. We're looking forward to it in October, my friends. Can't wait to get there, Jer.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Well, we'll see you guys back here next week for another episode of the Youth Ministry Team Podcast.